billionaire CEO left her for being infertile. Years later, she returned as his judge with secret twins. Your Honor, I move for immediate recusal on the grounds of personal bias. The courtroom fell silent as Dominic Blackwood rose to his feet, his voice cutting through the tension like a blade. Judge Vivian Mercer's gaze remained steady, betraying nothing as she looked down from the bench at the man who had once been her husband. The man who had walked away from their marriage with cruel finality when doctors said she couldn't bear children. On what specific grounds, Mr. Blackwood? She asked, her voice carrying the weight of 12 years of secrets. You know exactly why, Vivian, he said, forgetting protocol in his anger. This is a conflict of interest of the highest order. A murmur rippled through the courtroom as the tech billionaire addressed the federal judge by her first name. That's Judge Mercer to you, Mr. Blackwood, she corrected, her composure unshaken. And I'll remind you that our previous acquaintance ended over a decade ago. Did it? His eyes narrowed. Then perhaps you can explain why the two teenagers sitting in the back of this courtroom have my eyes and your smile? Have you ever witnessed the moment when someone's carefully constructed world shatters in an instant? When the past and present collide with such force that nothing will ever be the same again. This is the story of a woman who rebuilt her life from ashes, only to find herself face to face with the man who burned it all down, now holding the fate of his billion-dollar empire in her hands. If you believe that karma eventually finds its way back to those who deserve it, hit that like button right now. I'm Mr. Harrison, and today I'm sharing the remarkable story of how a woman's journey from heartbreak to triumph came full circle in the most unexpected way. 12 years earlier, the autumn rain had pelted against the windows of Vivian Mercer's apartment as she stared at the pregnancy test in her trembling hands. 2 pink lines. Unmistakable. Impossible. 3 months before that moment, her husband of 5 years, tech mogul Dominic Blackwood, had walked out of their marriage with cruel finality. What's the point? He'd said, voice cold as the January wind that howled outside their penthouse that night. You can't give me what I need. A legacy, children, a future. Vivian had stood there, stunned into silence, watching as he packed a single suitcase with methodical precision. Dominic, please, she'd finally managed. We can keep trying. There are other options. Adoption, surrogacy. He'd barely glanced up. I need my own bloodline, Vivian. The Blackwood name has to continue through my direct descendants. It's non-negotiable. 5 years of marriage, and that's all that matters to you? Her voice had cracked with disbelief. 5 years of trying and failing, he'd corrected. The fertility specialists were clear. Your chances are less than 2%. I'm a businessman, Vivian. Those odds aren't worth my investment. The memory of those words still burned as Vivian sat alone in her bathroom, staring at the positive pregnancy test. Not just pregnant, but carrying twins according to yesterday's ultrasound. The miracle she'd prayed for had arrived precisely when it no longer mattered. Her hand moved instinctively to her still flat stomach. He can never know, she whispered to the empty room. Never. The decision crystallized in that moment. She would leave Seattle, disappear from Dominic's world entirely. Her legal career, their social circle, the life she'd built. All of it would be sacrificed to protect these precious lives growing inside her from becoming pawns in Dominic's corporate dynasty. By morning, Vivian had booked a one-way ticket to Boston, where her grandmother's empty brownstone awaited. By evening, she had resigned from her position at Preston and Winters Law. And by midnight, Vivian Mercer had vanished from Seattle, leaving behind only whispers and speculation. The early years in Boston had been challenging beyond anything she could have imagined. Heavily pregnant and starting over in a city where she had no professional connections, Vivian had initially survived on her savings while studying for the Massachusetts bar exam. Eleanor and Elliot were born on a snowy December night, tiny but perfect, with their father's striking amber eyes and Vivian's determined chin. As she held them for the first time, exhausted but exhilarated, she made them a promise. You will never be anyone's pawns, she whispered. You'll grow up knowing you're loved for exactly who you are, not what legacy you might fulfill. Single motherhood with infant twins while rebuilding a legal career had tested every ounce of Vivian's strength and resilience. She'd started as a public defender, working punishing hours while relying on a network of babysitters, and eventually a kind elderly neighbor who became like a grandmother to the twins. The children never knew how many nights Vivian had collapsed into tears after they were asleep, overwhelmed by exhaustion and doubt. They never saw her poring over case files at 3 a.m. after feeding sessions, determined to excel despite the circumstances. They never realized that their birthday gifts came at the cost of their mother skipping meals to save money. What they did know was that they were fiercely loved, that their mother never missed a school play or science fair, even if it meant working through the night to compensate, that their home, though modest, was filled with books and laughter and unconditional acceptance. As the twins grew, so did Vivian's reputation in the legal community. Her brilliant mind and uncompromising ethics caught the attention of a federal judge looking for a clerk. That position became a stepping stone to the district attorney's office, then to a prestigious judgeship herself, one of the youngest federal judges ever appointed in Massachusetts. The twins had inherited their parents' formidable intellects. By 12, they were already in advanced placement programs, with Elliot showing particular brilliance in quantum computing and Eleanor demonstrating remarkable talent in constitutional law. They were confident, compassionate, and curious. Everything Vivian had hoped they would become. And they had questions. Of course they did. "Mom, who is our father?" Eleanor had first asked at age 7. After a Father's Day celebration at school left her confused and sad. Vivian had been prepared for this moment. "Your father is a brilliant man who wasn't ready to be a parent when you were born," she'd explained carefully. "Someday, when the time is right, I'll tell you everything about him." As they grew older, their questions became more specific, more difficult to deflect without outright lies. Vivian had maintained her policy of honesty without full disclosure, promising that the complete story would come when they were old enough to understand its complexities. She never expected that day to arrive through a cosmic coincidence that placed her ex-husband's billion-dollar patent case on her docket. The morning the case file landed on her desk, Vivian had stared at Dominic's name on the plaintiff line, feeling as though the universe had played an elaborate practical joke. Blackwood Technologies versus Horizon Innovations. A patent infringement suit worth billions, with none other than Dominic Blackwood as the plaintiff. Her first instinct had been to recuse herself immediately. But something stopped her, perhaps the memory of his callous dismissal, or perhaps the knowledge that her twins, Elliot and Eleanor, were at that very moment in their advanced science program, unaware that their father was about to enter their lives in the most unexpected way. The law was clear. There was no technical requirement for recusal. Their marriage had ended 12 years ago, and Dominic had no knowledge of the children. No financial ties remained between them. On paper, she could preside over this case with perfect impartiality. But hearts rarely follow legal precedent. Vivian closed the file, decision made. She would hear the case. Not for revenge. She had moved beyond such petty emotions years ago, but because fate had offered this strange intersection, and she sensed it held purpose beyond her understanding. Her clerk knocked softly. "Judge Mercer? The parties are ready for the preliminary hearing." Vivian smoothed her judicial robes and gathered her composure. "I'm ready." The courtroom fell silent as she entered, all rising in customary respect. From her elevated position on the bench, she allowed herself one brief glance at Dominic. 12 years had added distinguished silver at his temples but hadn't diminished his commanding presence. His expression registered nothing when their eyes met. No recognition, no flicker of their shared past. Of course, she had changed. The soft-spoken corporate attorney he'd married had transformed into a federal judge with a reputation for brilliant, uncompromising rulings. Her once-long chestnut hair was now cut in a sleek bob, streaked with premature silver that she wore as badges of hard-won wisdom. The woman he had discarded no longer existed. "Good morning," she began, her voice steady. "I'm Judge Vivian Mercer, and I'll be presiding over Blackwood Technologies versus Horizon Innovations." She watched as Dominic leaned toward his attorney, whispering something. The lawyer's eyes widened slightly, darting between client and judge. Recognition had dawned. "Before we proceed, I should disclose that Mr. Blackwood and I were previously acquainted, Vivian stated for the record. However, that acquaintance ended over a decade ago and will in no way affect my ability to rule impartially in this matter. If either party wishes to request my recusal, now is the time. The courtroom remained silent, tension thickening the air. Dominic's attorney rose. Your Honor, may we request a brief recess to discuss this matter with our client? Granted. 20 minutes. If you've ever had to rebuild your life after someone told you weren't enough, comment strength below. And if you're curious about what happens when Dominic discovers the truth about his children, subscribe to Timeless Love Tales with Mr. Harrison for the next part of this extraordinary story. As she retreated to her chambers, Vivian's phone buzzed with a text from Eleanor. Mom! Elliot won the regional science competition. His quantum computing model blew everyone away. Pride surged through her. Eleanor and Elliot, brilliant beyond their years, had inherited their father's analytical mind and her own tenacious spirit. They were her triumph, her joy, her vindication. Another text followed. Can we celebrate at Marino's tonight? Also, weird question, is Dominic Blackwood related to us somehow? His photo was in the tech magazine sponsoring the competition, and Elliot says we have his exact same eyes. Vivian's heart stuttered. The twins had asked variations of this question over the years, their curiosity about their father growing alongside their understanding of genetics. She had never lied, only said he was a brilliant man who wasn't ready to be a father, and someday, when the time was right, she would explain everything. That someday had arrived with unexpected haste. A knock interrupted her thoughts. Her clerk appeared, face tense. Judge, Mr. Blackwood is requesting a private meeting in your chambers. His attorney says it's regarding your disclosure. The moment of reckoning had arrived sooner than anticipated. Send him in. Dominic entered alone, closing the door behind him with deliberate care. For a moment, they regarded each other in silence. 12 years of unspoken history suspended between them. Vivian. Her name in his voice still carried echoes of their past. Dominic. She remained seated, maintaining the power dynamic of her position. You disappeared. Not a question, but an accusation. You left, she countered simply. He moved closer, studying her face. You could have recused yourself. There was no legal requirement to do so. This isn't about legality. His voice hardened. This case represents 3 years of development and billions in potential revenue. I won't have it compromised by personal history. Vivian met his gaze steadily. Your concern is noted. However, I assure you my rulings will be based solely on the merits of the case. Like your ruling to disappear without a trace? Bitterness edged his words. I searched for you, Vivian, for months. This surprised her. Why? You made your position quite clear. I was defective goods, unable to provide the Blackwood heir you required. His expression flickered. That's not. Your exact words were, what's the point? She kept her voice clinical, as if reciting case law rather than the words that had shattered her world. You said you needed a legacy, children, a future. I was wrong. The admission seemed torn from him. I realized that too late. Vivian's phone buzzed again on her desk, screen illuminating with Eleanor's message. Mom, should we invite Dr. Winters to dinner too? She wants to talk to you about Elliot's project having commercial applications. Dominic's eyes caught on the screen, widening as he glimpsed the message and the photo of Eleanor that accompanied it. A girl with his unmistakable eyes and determined chin. The air between them changed, charged with a new tension. You have a daughter, he said, voice hollow. Vivian slipped the phone into her drawer. I have children, yes? Children. The word hung between them. How old? 12. Simple mathematics played across his face, followed by dawning comprehension. That's impossible. The doctors said. 2% chance isn't 0%, Vivian replied evenly. I discovered I was pregnant 3 months after you left. Dominic gripped the edge of her desk, knuckles whitening. And you didn't tell me? You kept my children from me for 12 years. They're not your children, Dominic. You forfeited that right when you walked away from a marriage because I was broken. The old pain surfaced briefly before she submerged it again. You wanted heirs, not children. There's a profound difference. I want to meet them. His voice held the same commanding tone he used in boardrooms, expecting immediate compliance. That's not your decision to make. Vivian stood, authority radiating from her slender frame. Now, I suggest we return to court. I'll hear arguments for recusal, but be advised. If I determine your motion is based solely on attempting to manipulate this situation for personal reasons, I will deny it and proceed with the case. Dominic stared at her, the calculating businessman reasserting control over the shocked ex-husband. This isn't over, Vivian. On that point, we agree. She moved toward the door. But whatever happens next will be on my terms, not yours. I've spent 12 years building a life protected from your influence. I won't allow you to storm in and disrupt what I've created. What you've created belongs partly to me, he countered. The law might agree with you, she acknowledged. But the law also recognizes abandonment. Think carefully about your next move, Dominic. Unlike 12 years ago, I'm no longer the one with everything to lose. As they returned to the courtroom, Vivian felt an unexpected sense of liberation. The secret she'd carried for 12 years had finally emerged, and with it, the burden of silence had lifted. Whatever came next would be complicated, messy, and potentially painful, but it would be honest. And honesty, she had learned, was the only foundation worth building upon. What neither Vivian nor Dominic realized as they re-entered the courtroom was that they had an audience. In the back row of the gallery, having arrived early for their planned surprise visit to watch their mother in court, sat Eleanor and Elliot Mercer. They had observed the unmistakable tension between the judge and the tech mogul, noting with scientific curiosity the identical shape of Elliot's eyes reflected in the plaintiff's face. Hypothesis confirmed, Eleanor whispered to her brother. That's definitely him. Elliot nodded, analytical mind already calculating probabilities and outcomes. Mom's going to need our help navigating this variable. Good thing we're excellent problem solvers, Eleanor replied, watching as their mother took her place on the bench, strength evident in every movement. The twins settled in to watch the proceedings, unaware that they were witnessing not just a patent case, but the collision of past and present that would reshape their future. Back at the bench, Vivian called the court to order. Counsel for the plaintiff, you requested this recess to discuss my disclosure with your client. Have you reached a decision regarding my continued presence on this case? Dominic's attorney, a sharp-featured man named Lawrence Hargrove, rose. Your Honor, after careful consideration, my client has decided not to request recusal at this time. Murmurs rippled through the courtroom. This was clearly not the response anyone had expected, least of all Vivian. Very well, she said, maintaining her judicial composure despite her surprise. Then we will proceed with the preliminary hearing as scheduled. For the next hour, Vivian listened as both sides presented their initial arguments in the patent infringement case. Blackwood Technologies claimed that Horizon Innovations had stolen proprietary quantum encryption technology worth billions in potential revenue. Horizon countered that they had developed their technology independently, with significant differences from Blackwood's patents. Throughout the proceedings, Vivian was acutely aware of Dominic's gaze fixed on her, studying her every expression and gesture. She was equally aware of her children in the back of the courtroom, witnessing this strange intersection of worlds they didn't yet understand. When the hearing concluded, Vivian issued her preliminary rulings on procedural matters and set a schedule for discovery and subsequent hearings. Court is adjourned until next Monday at 9 a.m. As she rose to leave the bench, Dominic made his move. Your Honor, he called out, ignoring his attorney's restraining hand. I'd like to address the court on a personal matter. Mr. Blackwood, this is highly irregular, Vivian warned, already suspecting what was coming. Nevertheless, it's necessary. Dominic turned to face the gallery, his eyes finding the twins in the back row. Eleanor and Elliot Mercer, I presume? The courtroom fell silent as all eyes turned to the two teenagers, who sat straight-backed and unflinching under the sudden scrutiny. Mr. Blackwood, Vivian's voice cut like steel. You will not address my children in my courtroom. Your children. Dominic's voice carried throughout the silent room. I think you mean our children, Your Honor. And that was the moment when Vivian's carefully constructed world collided irrevocably with the past she had fled. The moment that brought us to the dramatic scene that opened our story. Your Honor, I move for immediate recusal on the grounds of personal bias. Dominic declared formally, though his eyes never left the twins. On what specific grounds, Mr. Blackwood? Vivian asked, though they both knew the answer. You know exactly why, Vivian, he said, forgetting protocol in his anger. This is a conflict of interest of the highest order. That's Judge Mercer to you, Mr. Blackwood, she corrected. And I'll remind you that our previous acquaintance ended over a decade ago. Did it? His eyes narrowed. Then perhaps you can explain why the two teenagers sitting in the back of this courtroom have my eyes and your smile? The twins, to their credit, remained composed despite the dramatic revelation. Eleanor even raised her hand slightly, as if in a classroom. Your Honor, if I may address the court? Before Vivian could respond, Elliot stood beside his sister. We would also like to request recognition as interested parties in these proceedings. Vivian felt a surge of pride through her shock. Her children, facing this impossible moment with the same poise and intelligence that had defined their upbringing. This court is adjourned, she declared, banging her gavel with finality. All parties will reconvene in my chambers immediately. If you think Vivian was right to protect her children from a man who saw them as mere heirs rather than people to love, hit that like button. And if you're wondering how these brilliant twins will handle meeting the father who never knew they existed, subscribe to Timeless Love Tales with Mr. Harrison for the conclusion of this powerful story. 5 minutes later, Vivian's chambers had become the stage for a family drama 12 years in the making. The twins sat side by side on a leather sofa, their posture identical, back straight, hands folded, expressions carefully neutral. Dominic stood by the window, his usual commanding presence now tinged with something unfamiliar. Uncertainty. Vivian remained behind her desk, the physical barrier a necessary shield as her professional and personal worlds collided catastrophically. I believe introductions are in order, Eleanor said, breaking the tense silence with remarkable composure for a 12-year-old facing her biological father for the first time. I'm Eleanor Mercer. This is my brother, Elliot. Twins, Dominic said softly, studying their faces with undisguised wonder. Identical in neither appearance nor temperament, I suspect. Fraternal twins are more common in older mothers and those undergoing fertility treatments, Elliot stated matter-of-factly. Though in our case, it appears to have been spontaneous. Vivian watched this exchange with a mixture of pride and apprehension. Her children were handling this impossible situation with remarkable grace, but she knew them well enough to see the emotions they were carefully containing. Curiosity, hurt, excitement, wariness. How long have you known? Dominic asked them directly, bypassing Vivian entirely. About you specifically? Approximately 47 minutes, Eleanor replied. About our father being someone Mom once knew who wasn't ready for parenthood? Our entire lives. That's not. Dominic began, then stopped, glancing at Vivian. That's not the whole truth. Then perhaps you should tell us your version, Elliot suggested, his tone neutral but his eyes, so like his father's, sharp with assessment. Dominic moved closer to the twins, then seemed to think better of it and remained standing at a respectful distance. I was never told you existed. I left your mother before she knew she was pregnant. When she discovered it, she chose to disappear rather than tell me. And why did you leave her? Eleanor asked the question direct and unflinching. Dominic hesitated, clearly unprepared for such straightforward interrogation from a child. It was complicated. No, it wasn't, Vivian interjected, unwilling to let him rewrite history. You left because doctors said I couldn't have children. You needed an heir for your legacy, and I couldn't provide one. It was a business decision, plain and simple. You told us our father wasn't ready for parenthood, Elliot observed, turning to his mother. But it sounds more like he wanted parenthood too much, just on very specific terms. The insight, so precise and mature, momentarily silenced both adults. Vivian had always known her children were perceptive, but in this moment, she realized they had developed a wisdom beyond their years. "You're right," she acknowledged. "I simplified a complex truth to protect both you and myself. I'm sorry for that." "And I'm sorry too," Dominic said unexpectedly, "for creating a situation where your mother felt she had to run away and raise you alone." Eleanor studied him with the same analytical gaze she applied to difficult legal concepts. "What exactly do you want now, Mr. Blackwood? Now that you know we exist?" The question hung in the air, its implications vast and complicated. Dominic looked genuinely thrown by it, as if he hadn't thought beyond the shock of discovery to what might come next. I don't know," he admitted, the uncertainty so at odds with his public persona that it seemed to physically pain him. "I'd like to know you, both of you, as your children or as your heirs?" Elliot asked pointedly. Dominic flinched. "Is there a difference?" "A profound one," Eleanor replied. "One is about who we are. The other is about what we represent." Vivian felt a swell of emotion watching her children articulate the very distinction she had built their lives around. They understood, had always understood on some level what had driven her decisions. "I think," Dominic said slowly, "that I'd like the opportunity to learn the difference." It was the first answer he'd given that seemed to satisfy the twins. They exchanged a quick glance, one of those wordless communications that had fascinated Vivian since their infancy. "We're willing to consider it," Elliot said finally. "Under certain conditions." "Conditions?" Dominic raised an eyebrow, the businessman resurfacing. "First, this case needs to be reassigned to another judge," Eleanor stated firmly. "Mom's integrity is non-negotiable." "Agreed," Dominic said without hesitation. "Second, any relationship between us will develop at our pace. Not yours," Elliot continued. "No demands, no expectations, no corporate grooming." Dominic nodded more slowly this time. "That's reasonable." "Third," Eleanor added, "you need to understand that we're not starting from scratch. We have a family, Mom, each other, our community in Boston. You're not filling an empty space. You're being considered for addition to something already whole." The room fell silent as Dominic absorbed this. Vivian watched him carefully, seeing something shift in his expression. A recognition, perhaps, that these children were not blank slates awaiting his imprint, but fully formed individuals with their own identities and boundaries. "I understand," he said finally, "and I accept your terms." "Then we have a preliminary agreement," Elliot concluded, as if they just negotiated a business deal rather than the foundation of a potential family relationship. Vivian finally spoke, her voice gentle but firm. "There's one more thing, Dominic. I'll be filing for recusal from your case immediately, but I want to be clear. My relationship with the children is not up for negotiation or legal challenge. Any attempt to use the courts to force changes to our family structure will end all contact permanently." Dominic met her gaze directly. "I won't make that mistake, Vivian. I've already lost 12 years. I won't risk losing more." The sincerity in his voice surprised her. Perhaps time had changed him, or perhaps the shock of discovering his children had cracked something in his carefully constructed facade. Either way, she sensed he was telling the truth. "Then we'll proceed one step at a time," she conceded. The twins stood simultaneously, a synchronized movement they'd performed since childhood. "We should go," Eleanor said. "We have a science competition award ceremony at 6, and we need to prepare." "The quantum computing model," Dominic said, remembering the text message he'd glimpsed earlier. "You won." Elliot nodded, a hint of pride breaking through his composed exterior. "First place." The judges said the application potential was unprecedented for a student project. I'd like to hear about it sometime," Dominic said, the request tentative, so unlike his usual commanding tone. "Perhaps you could attend the ceremony," Eleanor suggested, surprising both adults. As a representative of Blackwood Technologies, the competition sponsor, it would be a logical first step. Dominic looked to Vivian, clearly uncertain whether the invitation extended to her approval. She hesitated, then nodded slightly. If that's what the children want. 6 o'clock at the Boston Science Academy, Elliot confirmed. Business casual attire is appropriate. With that, the twins excused themselves, leaving the adults alone in a silence heavy with unresolved history and uncertain future. They're extraordinary, Dominic said finally. Yes, they are, Vivian agreed. They've always been. You did that, he acknowledged. You raised them to be confident, brilliant, self-possessed. I did, she said, not bothering with false modesty. Every day for 12 years. I've put their well-being above everything else. Dominic moved to the chair across from her desk, sitting down heavily. I've imagined our reunion 1,000 different ways over the years, Vivian, but never like this. You imagined our reunion? The question escaped before she could contain her surprise. Of course I did. He looked genuinely puzzled by her reaction. When you disappeared, I hired private investigators. I searched for months. When the trail went cold, I still kept looking, checking periodically for years. Why? The question that had haunted her since their confrontation earlier. You made your choice, Dominic. You walked away. I made a mistake, he said simply. The biggest of my life. I realized it almost immediately, but by then, you were gone. Vivian studied him, searching for signs of manipulation or calculation. She found none, only a weariness that matched her own. What changed your mind? The emptiness, he answered after a moment. I thought I wanted an heir, a continuation of the Blackwood legacy. But after you left, I realized what I'd actually lost was a partner. Someone who challenged me, who saw me as more than Blackwood Technologies. Someone who loved me despite my flaws, not because of my success. The words struck a chord Vivian had thought long silenced. She remembered that man, the Dominic who had once looked at her with genuine admiration, who had valued her mind as much as her heart, before ambition and legacy had consumed him. It's too late for us, Dominic, she said quietly. Too much has happened. I know. He nodded, acceptance in his expression. But perhaps it's not too late for me to know my children, to be some small part of their lives, if they'll allow it. That will be their decision, Vivian said. I won't influence them either way. Fair enough. He stood, preparing to leave. For what it's worth, Vivian, seeing the people they've become, I understand now why you left, why you protected them from me. I wasn't worthy of them then. And now? She couldn't help asking. Now? A sad smile crossed his face. Now I hope to earn the privilege of knowing them, not as Blackwood heirs, but as the remarkable individuals they already are. As he reached the door, Vivian called after him. Dominic? Elliot's project, it really is groundbreaking. You'll be impressed. I already am, he replied. With all three of you. After he left, Vivian sat alone in her chambers, the events of the day washing over her in waves. The secret she had carried for 12 years was now in the open, for better or worse. Her carefully constructed life had been irrevocably altered, and yet, somehow she felt lighter. The twins were waiting in the courthouse lobby, deep in conversation when she found them. They fell silent as she approached, watching her with those perceptive eyes that missed nothing. Are you okay, Mom? Eleanor asked, reaching for her hand. I think I am, Vivian answered honestly. How about you two? This is a lot to process. We've suspected something like this for approximately 3 years. For months, Elliot stated matter-of-factly. The statistical improbability of our father being permanently not ready for parenthood, combined with your reluctance to discuss specific details, suggested a more complex narrative. Plus, we Googled him 2 years ago, Eleanor added with a slight smile. The eye resemblance is rather definitive. Vivian stared at them, momentarily speechless. You knew? All this time. We hypothesized, Elliot corrected. Today provided confirmation. Why didn't you say anything? Vivian asked, trying to process this revelation. You always said you'd tell us when the time was right, Eleanor explained gently. We trusted you to know when that would be. The simple faith in her judgment brought tears to Vivian's eyes. After everything, her children had trusted her to guide them through even this most personal of journeys. I love you both so much, she said, pulling them into a rare public embrace. More than anything in this world. We know, Mom, they replied in unison, returning her hug with equal fervor. As they walked out of the courthouse together, Vivian realized that whatever happened next, whether Dominic became a part of their lives or remained on the periphery, the foundation she had built with her children was unshakable. They would face this new chapter as they had faced everything else. Together with honesty, intelligence, and the fierce love that had sustained them for 12 remarkable years. If you believe that true family is built on love and trust rather than biology or obligation, share this video with someone who needs to hear that message today. And if you want to see how Dominic's journey from entitled CEO to humbled father unfolds, subscribe to Timeless Love Tales with Mr. Harrison for stories that remind us it's never too late for redemption and second chances. The Boston Science Academy auditorium buzzed with excitement as students, parents, and corporate sponsors gathered for the Regional Science Competition Awards ceremony. Vivian sat in the third row, her posture perfect despite the emotional turbulence of the day. She had changed from her judicial robes into an elegant navy dress, professional yet maternal, a balance she had perfected over the years. The seat beside her remained conspicuously empty until precisely 5 minutes before the ceremony was scheduled to begin. Dominic Blackwood slipped into it with a quiet nod of acknowledgement, his usual entourage of assistants and security notably absent. Thank you for allowing this, he said softly. It wasn't my decision, Vivian reminded him. The twins invited you. Nevertheless. He smoothed his tie. Hermes, she noted, some habits never changed, and glanced around the auditorium. This is quite impressive for a school competition. The Boston Science Academy is the top STEM institution on the East Coast, Vivian explained with quiet pride. The twins have been attending since they tested off the charts in 4th grade. Scholarships, she added, anticipating his next question. They wouldn't have needed scholarships if... Dominic began, then stopped himself. I apologize. That was unfair. Vivian appreciated the self-correction. Perhaps he was capable of growth after all. They earned those scholarships, Dominic. Merit, not circumstance. It's important you understand that. Before he could respond, the lights dimmed and the ceremony began. The Academy's director welcomed everyone, followed by brief remarks from corporate sponsors. When Dominic's name was called as the representative from Blackwood Technologies, he rose and delivered a short, eloquent speech about innovation and young minds shaping the future. He didn't prepare that, Vivian realized with surprise. After 5 years of marriage, she recognized the difference between Dominic's scripted corporate addresses and his genuine thoughts. This had been the latter, heartfelt and spontaneous. The awards presentation began with honorable mentions and third-place recognitions. When they reached the first-place category for Advanced Computing Solutions, Elliot's name was announced to enthusiastic applause. Vivian watched with swelling pride as her son walked confidently to the stage. At 12, he was significantly younger than most competitors in his category, yet he carried himself with the quiet assurance of someone who belonged exactly where he was. Elliot's project, Quantum Entanglement as a Secure Communication Protocol, represents a breakthrough in applying quantum computing principles to everyday security challenges, the presenter explained. The judges were particularly impressed by the practical applications of his theoretical model, which could revolutionize data encryption for everything from banking to national security. As Elliot accepted his award, his gaze found his mother in the audience, then shifted slightly to Dominic beside her. Something passed between father and son in that moment, a recognition, perhaps, of shared intellectual DNA that transcended their complicated circumstances. I'd like to thank the Academy for their support, Elliot said into the microphone, his voice steady despite his youth, and my sister Eleanor, who helped refine my theoretical framework. Most importantly, my mother, who has always taught us that knowledge is valuable not for its own sake, but for how it can improve lives. The simple acknowledgement brought tears to Vivian's eyes. Beside her, Dominic sat very still, his expression unreadable. After the ceremony concluded, they gathered in the reception hall where winning projects were displayed. Eleanor had joined them, having served on the student organizing committee for the event. The four of them stood in an awkward cluster, a family configuration none of them had experienced before. "Your project is remarkable," Dominic said to Elliot, studying the display with genuine interest. "The application of Bell's inequality to create a verification protocol is particularly innovative." Elliot's eyebrows rose slightly, clearly surprised by Dominic's technical understanding. "You're familiar with quantum mechanics?" "My undergraduate degree was in theoretical physics before I moved to computer science," Dominic explained. "Quantum computing has been a personal interest, though I rarely get to engage with it directly anymore. Blackwood Technologies' quantum division is considered industry-leading," Eleanor observed. "Is that your influence?" "Partially," Dominic acknowledged, "though our chief scientist deserves most of the credit. I simply recognized the potential early and provided the resources." "Resource allocation is a critical leadership function," Elliot noted. "Identifying promising avenues for investment requires both technical understanding and market foresight." Vivian watched this exchange with fascination. The twins were neither fawning over Dominic nor rejecting him outright. Instead, they were evaluating him, assessing his intellect and character with the same methodical approach they applied to complex problems. "Mom says you left because you wanted heirs, not children," Eleanor said suddenly, her directness cutting through the technical discussion. "Is that still true?" The question hung in the air, its bluntness creating a moment of tension. Dominic glanced at Vivian, who remained deliberately neutral, then back to his daughter. "I thought it was what I wanted," he answered carefully. "I was raised to believe that legacy was everything. The Blackwood name, the Blackwood empire, the Blackwood bloodline continuing through generations. It seemed logical, even necessary. And now," Eleanor pressed, "now I realize how hollow that thinking was," Dominic admitted. "Looking at both of you, seeing what remarkable people you've become without any input from me or the Blackwood legacy. I understand that children aren't extensions of their parents. They're entirely new individuals with their own potential and purpose." It was perhaps the most honest thing Vivian had ever heard him say. The twins exchanged one of their silent communications, a subtle shift in expression that only they could interpret. "That's an acceptable starting position," Elliot concluded, "though behavioral evidence will naturally carry more weight than verbal assertions." Dominic actually smiled at this, a genuine smile that reached his eyes. "I would expect nothing less from critical thinkers of your caliber." The conversation was interrupted by the approach of an elegant older woman in a tailored suit. "Dr. Winters," Vivian greeted her warmly. "Thank you for coming. I wouldn't have missed it," Dr. Winters replied, her gaze moving curiously between Vivian and Dominic before settling on Elliot. "Young man, your project has created quite a stir. The NSA representative who served as a judge has already asked for my contact information regarding potential applications." "NSA?" Dominic questioned, his business instincts visibly activating. "Dr. Winters is the twins' mentor and the head of the Academy's Advanced Research Division," Vivian explained. "She's been instrumental in helping Elliot develop his project, and in keeping it from being immediately commercialized," Dr. Winters added pointedly, giving Dominic an assessing look. "Elliot's work has significant national security implications. It needs proper development and protection." "I understand completely," Dominic said, surprising Vivian with his restraint. "Security applications should take precedence over commercial interests in this case." Dr. Winters' expression softened slightly. "Well, that's refreshingly reasonable for a tech CEO." She turned to Elliot. "The reception is winding down, but several judges have additional questions about your methodology. Would you mind joining us for a few minutes?" As Elliot followed Dr. Winters, Eleanor excused herself as well, mentioning committee responsibilities that needed her attention. This left Vivian and Dominic alone for the first time since their confrontation in her chambers. "They're extraordinary," Dominic said quietly. Brilliant, poised, thoughtful. Yes, they are, Vivian agreed. Elliot's project, it really could revolutionize secure communications. The commercial applications alone would be worth billions. That's not why he developed it, Vivian said firmly. He was fascinated by the theoretical problem first. The practical application came later. Knowledge for its own sake, then its application for the greater good, Dominic mused. You taught them that, he said. I tried to. Vivian watched her children across the room, each engaged in animated conversation with different groups. I wanted them to value their minds for more than what they could produce or earn. The opposite of how I was raised, Dominic acknowledged. Everything was measured by its market value or contribution to the family legacy. They stood in silence for a moment, watching their children navigate the room with confidence and grace. I have no right to ask this, Dominic said finally. But I'd like to know them, Vivian. Not as Blackwood heirs or prodigies to be molded, but as the remarkable people they already are. Vivian considered his request, weighing 12 years of protective instincts against the reality of her children's evident curiosity about their father. That will be up to them, she said finally. I won't influence their decision either way. That's fair, he conceded. More than fair, given everything. But Dominic, she added, her voice taking on the firm tone that had made her a respected judge. If you hurt them, if you make them feel for one moment that they're valuable only for what they can contribute to your legacy, there won't be a second chance. I understand. His expression was solemn. I've already lost 12 years I can never get back. I won't risk losing whatever time they might be willing to share with me now. The sincerity in his voice gave Vivian pause. This was not the Dominic who had coldly informed her that their marriage was a failed investment. This man seemed humbled, reflective, changed by time or circumstance, or perhaps simply by the shock of discovering the children he never knew existed. One dinner, she decided, next week, at our home, where they feel comfortable and secure. We'll see how it goes from there. Relief and gratitude washed over his features. Thank you, Vivian. Don't thank me yet, she warned. The twins will have questions, difficult ones. They'll expect honest answers. I'll give them nothing less, he promised. The dinner a week later proved to be a turning point. Dominic arrived bearing not expensive wine but his grandfather's leather-bound physics journal from the 1950s. A thoughtful gesture acknowledging the twins' scientific interests while offering a genuine connection to their heritage. The evening ended with an unexpected moment of connection as Elliot asked about a quantum theory referenced in the journal. What began as a technical explanation evolved into an animated discussion that drew Eleanor in as well. For 20 minutes, the three of them spoke the shared language of theoretical physics, their similar minds finding common ground despite years of separation. In the months that followed, a careful relationship developed. Dominic attended science competitions and school events, gradually earning the right to know his children through consistent presence and genuine interest in their lives as they were, not as he might have imagined them. The greatest testament to his transformation came 6 months later, when Elliot's quantum encryption project attracted serious attention from both government agencies and private investors. Rather than leveraging his position to control the technology's development, Dominic instead established an independent foundation that would allow Elliot to direct his own research when he came of age, protecting both the innovation and the innovator's autonomy. You've changed, Vivian observed after witnessing this unexpected act of restraint. Losing you taught me what matters, Dominic replied simply. Finding them showed me who I want to be. The family they formed wasn't traditional or perfect. It was complicated, sometimes awkward, built on honesty rather than illusion. But it was real, a testament to the fact that sometimes the most meaningful legacies aren't built on bloodlines or business empires, but on the courage to grow beyond who we once were into who we might yet become. If you believe in second chances and the power of truth to heal even the deepest wounds, share this story with someone who needs to hear it today. And remember that sometimes the most beautiful beginnings arise from what we once thought were endings. This is Mr. Harrison, reminding you that true legacy isn't measured in wealth or power, but in the lives we touch and the love we leave behind.